This is what we're doing to protect our families. And you don't have to do it, but stay away from everybody. Because if you're the one who's not paying attention and you're coughing and sneezing, you don't want to, then stay out of the public, man. This is not, nobody wants this. I don't want it. And I think he's forgetting that people are still at risk who cannot get vaccinated. People who can't get that. Little kids under the age of 5. Yeah. Or people with health conditions. How dare you be so flippant, man?
Well, they still like people they're over it, like a relationship. I'm over it. I don't feel like seeing it anymore.
To the post-mask part, because I think there's a prudence we've learned with the mask, the hand sanitizing, that kind of like 9/11 with flying is always going to be here now. There's a new normal. In the beginning, when at post 9/11, people didn't want to fly, and the security measures felt like, how do we do this? You know, and now it's the norm. I think some of the things we've learned in this pandemic are going to stay the same. I may never ride a subway again without a mask. I may never go indoors to big crowds and never feel comfortable without a mask, and that's up to me to do that.
I will deal with Whoopi in a minute, but that, I don't even know who that was, but the comparison to post 9/11 security theater at airports is not a flattering one if you're trying to defend COVID mitigation, because the things we do at airports are completely pointless. Yep. They do not enhance safety. I've talked about it on the show a lot. I'm not telling viewers anything they haven't heard me say before, but we know that those ridiculously invasive security measures are not, they fail to catch contraband. It doesn't even matter if someone brings a knife on a plane anymore because the cockpit doors are locked. You are not going to hijack a plane. It's not possible to do it. It was possible before because we used to let hijackers hijack planes because it hadn't occurred to us that they would try to fly them into buildings. They usually just tried to take them to Cuba. It's like not bringing out a 4-ounce bottle of water on, like, it's stupid.
Right.
So if you're saying, so that comparison is not favorable to COVID.
Right. Okay, but how about the rest of it? As a libertarian, on some level, isn't Whoopi, and I think the other woman's name is Sarah, aren't they just saying, if you don't want to take a vaccine, if you don't want to wear a mask, you have the right to do what you want to do, just keep your distance away from me and we can both be copacetic?
That's all fine. That's absolutely fine. We can make that compromise. You do what you want. I do what I want. It's absolutely fine. But no, they are not saying that. Their archetype, the Karen, wants to get you in trouble for not doing it. It's not a live and let live. I'm happy to let live. Other people, I don't care if other people, what policies they're following. They might have a different circumstance. And it could be that different circumstances are warranted for different people. If you are immunocompromised, you might want to wear a face shield wherever you go for a long while. If you're older, you might have different policies in a retirement home. There can be different policies for different environments, but that does not feel like what the team COVID restrictions.
Yeah, well, I do think maybe not necessarily in this conversation, but generally speaking, there is a kind of moralizing that's going on here. Like, there's a maximalist view of how to protect others that you could articulate in a lot of different contexts. I mean, the same people who are saying you might encounter someone on the sidewalk who's immunocompromised, so you should wear a mask outside while playing soccer, might also be texting and driving. Or the way that people talk about folks who smoke and, get various diseases. Like, okay, maybe I don't smoke, but I do something else that's harmful and you do something. And the world is flawed. Yeah. We're all doing our best. And I think that even though we would advise our loved ones and people we want to protect to try to urge themselves toward more productive, safer behaviors, I would like to think that we could have this conversation without the undercurrent of politicized moralizing. That seems to be what people are really reacting to, even if they don't object to the fundamentals here.
And we used to not have this militance for health advice. Like the CDC thinks the average man should drink like 1 glass of wine, thinks the average woman should never even look at alcohol because what if she's pregnant? And this is like laughable advice that that you shouldn't have eggs cooked a certain way, that you should, that your steak should be well done.
Especially after the tequila talk we had yesterday. we can't.
We're not following that. So it's just we used to take health officials with a great okay, yes, I flossed 18 times a day, right? I've never even seen a.
You're revealing a lot. You're revealing a lot.
Everybody lies. Everybody lies to their dentist. But you know what I'm saying? It used to be like, okay, but now it's like, oh no, if you're not doing that, you want people to die? You want children to die?
Really, both sides of this continue to ratchet things up, and that, frankly, is not in America's interest. And look, I get it. Nobody wants Russia to invade Ukraine. Nobody likes what Putin's doing. He's absolutely wrong in threatening military action on his neighbor. But we have to take a sober look at this and say, hey, what is going to be in America's best interest? And let me just flat tell you, even the possibility of military clash with Russia is the worst thing for America's interest. What we probably should do, actually what we should do, is to de-escalate this, is to say, hey, for the time being, we're going to put a moratorium on any talk about having Ukraine come into the NATO alliance, because they aren't even close to being ready. And in fact, number of our NATO allies say that they don't want Ukraine in there, and you have to have unanimous consent for that to happen. So what we need to do is we need to talk about that instead of continuing to just ramp up pressure for pressure. Because in part of this 8,500 troop, other people in NATO are sending warships into the Baltic Sea. Russia is sending 20 warships into the Baltic Sea. So every time one side moves, the other side moves another level up. And that gets you closer to where even the smallest trigger or accident could lead to war. Yeah,
right. And it's just as you said, we could easily say, look, Ukraine has no business in NATO right now because, they have corruption problems, they have all sorts of issues, and you would think that would turn the dial the other way. But instead, we're doing this kind of posturing, and it's the ratcheting up on both sides, like you said, pointing us toward a conflict that is insane. We're not going to World War III over a border issue thousands of miles away from us. It makes no sense.
Well, we should. But again, because of these actions we keep taking, we increase the risk of that. We're even an accident, not even necessarily a conscious decision and a thought. But look, the NATO Charter has always said that no new nation can come in unless it has two key criteria. One is it has resolved all internal disputes with ethnic groups or religious groups, and second, that it has resolved any issues on its border, neither of which Ukraine has even close to come and doing. But instead of recognizing that reality and saying it out loud, we continue to say to the opposite, like Jens Stoltenberg, the leader of NATO, that no, we're going to keep doing it. We're going to keep talking about that. Nobody can give us a veto, et cetera. So it's really a lot of hubris and a lot of saying, hey, we're stronger than you are, et cetera. But that's happening on both sides, and we've got to check that before things get out of hand.
Well, Colonel, what do you think is motivating that escalation? Is it just hubris, machismo? What's going on there?
Well, I mean, we got to be honest. That's a lot of it, because nobody wants to be seen as, quote, backing down from Putin. And, even Biden's already taken a lot of heat because he's not been forceful enough in some quarters. You've had two former assistant secretaries of defense saying that we should be ready to use military power, even U.S. troops against Russian troops, if this goes too far, which is insane because that has nothing to do with American national security interests. Yet these voices continue to get airtime. And I'm telling you, we've got to check this now before it gets too far.
The U.S. murder rate rose 30% between 2019 and 2020, the biggest single-year increase in 100 years. Aggravated assault rose too by 12%, and 12 major cities broke annual homicide records in 2021, 5 of them surpassing 2020's highs. In New York City in January alone, a teenager working at Burger King was killed, a woman was pushed to her death in front of a train, a young man died trying to save another from gang violence in the subway, a baby was shot in the face by a random bullet, and 5 officers were shot, 2 of them killed. In Philadelphia, 41 children were killed in 2021. 261 children were the victims of gunfire in Chicago, and they were 4 times as likely to be black than white. George Floyd's 4-year-old niece, who marched for racial justice along with a nation horrified by her uncle's murder by police, was shot in the torso while asleep in her bed. By the grace of God, she managed to survive a punctured lung and 3 cracked ribs. Tell the parents of these children that this isn't hell. Of course, the journalists on CNN panels aren't afraid to leave their homes. Throughout the 20th century, journalism went from being a blue-collar trade to an elite, highly educated, and well-paid caste. If journalists used to live in working-class neighborhoods and see themselves as the people outside of power demanding justice for the little guy, today journalists by and large live in the most expensive cities in America and not in the areas where crime is skyrocketing. This status revolution in American journalism is why journalists call the violent crime wave invented drama. They aren't lying. The truth is just invisible to them. They simply cannot fathom the fact that babies are being shot in their beds in neighborhoods just a few miles from where they live. Might as well be another country. The truth is, the media blackout on crime, like so much of what passes for political debate or racial division, is actually about class. It's poor and working class Americans who are facing down carjackings and shootings and violent robberies while being gaslit by CNN and in the pages of the New York Times by overeducated white liberals safely ensconced in neighborhoods where no one is afraid to leave their homes, by people who take Uber to avoid violent subways. Why is crime proliferating? We once made the mistake of trying to solve crime with racist and discriminatory over-policing and a war on drugs. But today, white liberals are responding to spiking murder rates with the exact opposite mistake. Progressives are voting in district attorneys who campaign on not prosecuting crimes. Democratic politicians are ignoring the daily murders and robberies and carjackings of their poorest constituents. And when they aren't totally erasing crime from view, leftist journalists and activists are routinely downplaying it. And in their attempt to right the wrongs of the past, which is important, and protect the rights of the accused, which is important, progressives are erasing the victims of crime, which is terrible. High on the aroma of their own virtue, rich white elites with acres of their own private property are voting in politicians and prosecutors who allow the homeless to rob poor children of their parks and beaches, the only outdoor space where they can play. People with 2 Mercedes SUVs in their driveway are voting to allow mentally ill people to threaten working class people riding the subways and buses that they themselves would never dream of using. In the name of racial justice, progressives are sentencing poor black children to live in neighborhoods where bullets fly into their little beds. Progressive prosecutors like George Gascon in Los Angeles, Chisa Boudin in San Francisco, Kim Foxx in Chicago, Larry Krasner in Philadelphia, and Alvin Bragg in Manhattan have all in their campaigns and their tenures emphasized pulling back on prosecution. Boudin campaigned on a decarceration platform and has made good on that promise. Charges for theft and petty theft declined by double digits under his watch. Over in Chicago, Foxx dismissed all charges against nearly 30% of felony defendants in her first year in office. Foxx and Boudin both said shoplifters would only face misdemeanor charges for anything under $1,000 or $800 of theft. And in New York, Alvin Bragg ordered his prosecutors to stop seeking prison sentences for armed robberies, drug dealing, and gun possession. Progressive newspapers catering to highly educated elites, like the New York Times, want you to believe that the tension over how to handle crime, quote, reflect a broader political argument between centrist Democrats across the nation looking to soothe voters worried about crime, and a movement of progressive prosecutors that has pushed for more lenient policies to make the justice system more fair and less biased. The truth is almost exactly the opposite. This fight is as much about class as it is about crime because the two are deeply connected. Believing the nonsense spewed by the Times that allowing poor people of color to be victimized makes the justice system, quote, more fair and less biased. A Brahmin left is voting to send career criminals back onto the streets where they act with ratified impunity. And it not only allows crime to proliferate, but it forecloses on the possibility for police reform, something that we desperately, desperately need.